Hello everyone, thanks for joining in. So this is going to be a SharePoint deep dive. This is going to be a repeat of the session that I did last week on Tuesday or Thursday. I think it was Thursday. Uh, has anyone attended the SharePoint deep dive session? Okay, so that's good. I don't think I need to introduce myself. I've been doing sessions for last 3 weeks, and I work with the ABS team, and I've been working on SharePoint for like 10 years or so. And these are some of the companies that I worked with in the past, and I am just helping out Airways on Office 365 and Azure. Right, so all these sessions that I'm doing are being recorded, and these are available on Stream. And if you don't know how to get to Stream, all you need to do is go to office.com, log in with your Airways credentials, and then you'll see a link to go to Stream. So when you click on Stream, then you'll see that there are various channels in there. There's a channel for Office 365 training. So all these trainings have been uploaded there. So if you want to revise, you could go back and hear them again. So this session is going to be a deep dive on SharePoint, and in my one of the introduction sessions I did mention that SharePoint is quite it's quite a huge topic. It can't be covered in just one session. And so what I have tried to do is just to cover the basic aspects of SharePoint which are relevant to Airways. So there are other areas in SharePoint that Airways is not using, so I won't talk about those. I'll just focus on the document management and the content management side of the things. And even in that, there is a lot to cover. So although in my agenda I had all the topics that I wanted to cover but in my last session we didn't have time to cover all these topics. So if I'm not able to cover these topics today, then there will be another deep dive session, and I'll try to finish those topics in another session. So in one of my introductory sessions, when I spoke about SharePoint, I said that SharePoint has basically 4 main objects. One is a list, one is a library, one is a app, and one is a page. So I'll cover each of them in details today. So to begin with, what's a list? So what I said is, in order to understand a list, you can think of a list as an Excel spreadsheet which has some rows and some columns, and you can create a similar structure as you see in Excel. You can create a similar structure in SharePoint like this, and a SharePoint list looks something like this. The benefit of having a SharePoint list as opposed to an Excel spreadsheet would be that all your data will be in one centralized place, so people wouldn't be referring to different versions of Excel at any given point of time. So you can forward a Excel spreadsheet to someone, they make a change, and then there's a new version, so there's no common place where the data resides. That's one thing. The other thing is that Excel is not actually a database. It works well for less data, but when data gets too huge, as in like if you have more than 65,000 rows, then Excel stops being it stops responding. So it's not actually a database. Whereas SharePoint, on the other hand, it has a relational database sitting behind it, so it's better. It allows you to better manage that level of data. So in Excel, when you have to create a new column, you just click on the next cell and you just create a new column there, right? So in SharePoint, the way you do that is you click on this button which says add column, and when you say add column, it brings up a list from where you can select what type of column you want to select. So what I'm going to do now is just show you some of the different column types that SharePoint has. So how do you create a list? To create a list, all you have to do is go to the landing page of the SharePoint site. I'll come back to what a site is, but for now, just assume that you have a site and now you have to create a list in the site. So when you go to the landing page of the site and you click on new, then you have this menu here. And from the menu, you just say select list. And you then just specify the name of the list there, whatever the name is. So I created a list. I've called that a demo list. So this is my list. And now I have to add columns there. So when I click on add column, as you can see that there are several different type of columns I can create. So I'll go through them one by one. So the first one is single line of text. If I click on more, it takes me to a more rich user experience. So if you just click, if you can create a column from that interface as well, but that doesn't give you all the options that you can choose from. So here, when you create a single line of text, the single line of text is meant to store information like name of a person or maybe some other text which is not too big. It's just a single line of text like the name suggests. And then you can specify if you want that to be a mandatory column or an optional field. So along with that, you could also check this box to say if you want this field to have a unique value for all the records. For instance, if you're creating the single line of text to be a driver license field, then the driver license has to be unique, right? So in order to enforce that, you could just check this option to say that enforce unique values. So it is going to do that validation for you when you enter the data. You can also add some other column validations. For example, if the driver license number has to be in a specific format, you can specify a format here. And then if the data you're providing doesn't meet that format, then you can specify a user message that the user will see if that doesn't work. So that's single line of text. And the limitation of a single line of text is it can only store up to 255 characters. You can go and increase that limit, but I wouldn't suggest you do that. The better way of managing that would be if you have more than 255 characters, then go for a multiple line of text field. The multiple line of text field is just it's another column type which lets you store plain text as well as rich text. So single line of text will only allow you to store the basics text as you save in Notepad. It won't let you store characters that are bold or special characters and things like that. But in multiple line of text, you can specify what format of data you want to store. So it can store images, it can store hyperlinks, it can store formatted text as in HTML text. You can also specify if it's a required column or not. It also has this feature called append changes to existing text. What that means is every time if you create a record for the first time, and if someone goes and changes it, now it is going to show all the audit history as to who changed what. So if you turn that option on, it starts saving that information in. The next.
So you see that. You see the changes, or do you have to look them up in another?
No, so you see the changes. It'll appear.
Like
It's like a markup. It will say that who made the change at what time and the text that he put in. The other field is the choice field. What the choice field lets you do is if there are some specific. If you want the user to choose from some specific fields and you don't want them to just enter a random value, then choice field is what you will use. So in the choice field, you can specify that what choices are there from going from this management console. So when you create a choice field, you just specify what values go there. You can specify how they are rendered on the form. So are they rendered in a drop down? Are they rendered in a radio button? And if you want, they can select more than one choice. They can specify more than one choice. Then you can specify them as checkboxes. So those are three ways of doing it. Like I mentioned that it only lets you select from the drop down, but what if the option that they want to choose is not in the drop down? For example, the city, if the city you're looking for is not in the drop down, what should they do? So it has a feature called allow fill. So if you set that to true, it can allow them to fill in another option in there. And the same goes for column validation. You can add validations around this field as well. The number field is as the name suggests, it allows you to save numeric values, and it lets you create some validations out of the box to say that, well, this value has to be in, if you specify two ranges there, then it will ensure that a value falls in that range. You can, if you check this box, then it assumes that what you're entering is a percentage. So on the form, it will display that value as a percentage field. The currency field.
I'm doing calculations work on that percentage. I assume it's just stored as a rather as a .5 or 0.3 or something like that. So if I'm doing calculations by percent, I can treat it as a normal number.
Yeah. So whatever number you enter there,
yeah,
it will assume that it's a percentage, but that doesn't mean that it'll convert it back. So if you enter 5, it's not going to store it at 0.05.
Yeah, it'll store it as 5.
It will store it as 5. Yeah. So the currency field is, again, it's quite similar to the number field, except that it will append the currency symbol in front against that number, and you can specify what format you want to store it in by selecting the all the currency formats are specified there. And then you can also specify that how many decimal places do you want to go to. The date time field is, again, quite a useful field to store date formats. And what SharePoint does is, whenever you create a list, it creates a form for you by default. And in the form, the date fields are going to appear with like a calendar menu, and you can select from there. You can save only the date, or you can capture the date as well as the time. There are two display formats. One is standard. Standard is the display format which is based on your regional settings. For instance, if you have set the regional settings of the site to be New Zealand, then it is going to accept the dates in DD/MM/YY format. Whereas if you specify it as US, then it is not going to accept dates in that format. It's going to accept the month, then followed by date and the year. What the friendly format does is it saves it in a universal format. So the date is going to appear something like 25th February 2019, Thursday. That kind of a thing. The lookup field is like a complex field, and I'll come back to it in a moment. But before that, I'll go back to I'll cover the others. So yes/no field is, as the name suggests, it lets you save the Boolean value. So it on the form it appears like a button. So if you turn on that button, the slider moves and it locks it as a true. Or if you click it again, then it opens back and it saves it as a 0. The person or the group field saves people. So you might have seen people picker fields in SharePoint. So this is the column type that supports it. It allows you to specify people, or if you select that box there, And that if you select that radio button, then it allows you to enter group names as well. So you can search for group as well as people in using this field here.
So these are the established groups that we've got on.
Correct. Yes, that's correct. And then the show field, what that does is it with this selection you can specify what do you want to see against that person's name when it appears in this in the form. So if you, by default it's the name of the person that appears there, but you can very well display their first name or the last name if you like. So that's the option you have. The hyperlink or a picture field is again a field that lets you capture a URL. So a hyperfield column will let you specify a display text and a URL. For instance, I want in my form, I want to save a URL, but I don't want to see this ugly URL because this could be as big as it can. So you want to show the text as visit site, and then when they click on it, it actually takes them back to that site. So you can specify that using a hyperlink field. The calculated field is quite useful when you actually do not have to, so it saves you the effort of creating an additional field. So some of the examples of calculated field could be calculating the sales price, right? So if you have a column for unit price, you have a column for quantity, then you need not create another column for saving the sales amount because you can calculate that by multiplying the two. So that's a calculated field. And as you can see that the calculation might not always be a number. So it could be a concatenation. So if you have a first name and a last name and you want to save another field as a full name, then you can concatenate the two and save it in that calculated field. And you use the data type to be a single line of text in that case. The external data field is not quite relevant in this case, and it's hardly used. I mean, it's seldom used. What that allows you to do is to pull information from a system that's outside Office 365. It's some other system that you want to integrate with, so you can pull data from other systems as well.
Does it work the other way? Can you send data?
Yes, but you have to write APIs for that. So inherently it doesn't do that. But was your question related to this external data field?
I'm just asking, can it do the opposite?
It can do. So there are settings you have to do at the management console to say that is it one way or it's going to be two way. Yeah. So there's some additional configuration that has to be done behind the scenes. And the managed metadata field is actually a field that lets you save an hierarchy. So how can I explain this? Let's say that I have a field called designation of a person, and the designation of the person is a manager. And there could be a manager in all the different departments within Airways, right? So just by storing manager doesn't quite tell me what that person does, right? So what this does is it lets you save a hierarchy there. And then if you select something like this, then it, along with saving the value, it also saves the hierarchy as to where this falls in this entire chain. So that's the use case of using a managed metadata column. Now I'll come back to that lookup field that I was talking about. So what lookup field lets you do is if you have one list that has some values and you want to pull these values in another list, that's when you use a lookup. So when you say a lookup field, it lets you pull the information from another list from within the same site. So I have a list called cars, and if I open it here, you'll see that it has, this list contains some information about cars. And I just want that in my new list that I'm creating, I want a drop down that displays all these cars that are showing up here. So what I can do is in the lookup field, I'll say pull everything from car, and in the drop down, I want you to show the title, which is the name of the car. And then along with that, I can also specify that I want to pull in that information as well that's there in that list along with the car information. So if I do that and I say okay, and now if I create a new item, and in my car you'll see that all those fields are being pulled here. And when I select save the value, it will also pull the car manufacturer, year, and sales from that other list into that list altogether. Right, so those are the different column types we have got in SharePoint. Any questions on different column types? And any questions from people on Skype? Okay, I'll move on to the next topic, which is views.
I did have one question.
Yeah, sure.
When we could format, was there a place where you could select the format, like day, month, year? Something about formatting. You could choose a validation.
Right.
When I look at that, I see a box and it's got nothing on it.
Right.
It says validation on the top.
Yeah.
And then I remember you told me you could put any sort of format on that. But how do you look that up? Where do you get that information from? Do you have to know that up here?
Yes, that's a good question. So the formulas in SharePoint, they are the same formulas that you use in Excel. So if your Excel formula works, and that's how I do it, I get it working in Excel first, and then copy the formula onto SharePoint. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's the trick.
That's the trick.
Excel first.
Yeah. Right. So the next thing is views. So what is a view? View is just a different way you represent the same data back in the list. So consider a use case where you have thousands of records in your list, and you don't want to see all these 1,000 records because it's not readable. A huge spreadsheet is not any worth, right? So what list allows you to do is to create some filtered views or sorted views or grouped views, and I'll demonstrate what I mean by that.
Sorry, can I just go back and see?
Yeah.
Sort of something on this.
Yes.
So normally in a spreadsheet, you can create a column, for instance, and you can actually put it where you like. So when you go to add the list, does it give you the ability to say whereabouts it is?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so if I go back to that list.
I assumed it did, but
Yeah. So if I go back to this list here. So when I create columns, they just get created in this order,
Yeah.
but then I can click on column ordering here,
yes.
and then I can specify the order, what goes on the top, what goes below.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So you can't just simply click and drag across.
You can't do
change
that.
them.
You can do that in the view. So for example, in here, I can drag them and
Yeah,
change them.
Right.
But then the next time I refresh this page, I don't think it's gonna retain that.
okay, it's
Okay,
only
so
in
that's
Yeah.
not much good.
individual view.
Yeah, it's. But if you want to change the look and feel, then that's when you create a view. So for example, I'll explain that to you in a moment. So if I go, as you can see, I've created some views here. So the first thing that the view does is it can create filters. So if I create a new view, oh, I have a view with that name already. Let's say 4. create a new view here, and I edit this to say that in this view I want to add a filter to say show me only the ones where the manufacturer is Ford. Then you'll see that my view is only going to show me the ones that are Ford. So if I just say OK, so you see that I can only see the ones. So it has added a filter in my view, and in this view, if I want that every time I refresh the page, I want to see the year before the title, then I can edit this view and I can say that the year is the first, and when I change this, it just bumps the other numbers by 1, so it arranges the other columns, so you don't have to do it with each column. And I say OK, and now you see the year appears, and you can change this view. You can create as many views as you like, and that way you can change the look and feel of the list with each view. The other option available within a view is the ability to group. So in here, if let's say if there were several of cars here, and I wanted them to be grouped by the manufacturer. So I want all the Toyota cars to appear under Toyota, all the Ford cars to appear under Ford. I can do that by creating a view. So I'll say create another view, or maybe I'll update this view to demonstrate that. So we had a look at what filtering is. Now we'll look at what grouping is. So if I say group this by manufacturer, you see that everything has now been grouped. So all Toyota cars have been grouped under Toyota. And so these are some of the options that you can use to sort of play with the data that's in the list. One thing that you have to be aware of is if you, in your list or in your library, if you have rows that you think are sensitive, you don't want to show this information back to the users, list views is not a way to achieve that. Because what list view does is it just hides stuff from people, but they can always get to it. If they go and change the view, they can go and look back at that information. So this is not a way to manage the security. So list views is just a way of having a convenience of looking at the data in different ways.
What is the correct one if you're trying to hide information?
Yeah, so that we'll come to that, that's security. That's permissions. You have to set the permissions in that case. Yeah. Right. Any questions on views? Okay. What else can we do in views? I'll just have a quick look to see if I missed anything. So if you have any numeric fields, or if you want to create a total of all the cars or anything, then you can use the total fields. If you are creating folders in your document library, and your document sits deep within the folder structure, and you want to create a flat structure so that you hide all those folders and you just show the documents, then you can do that by using this option where you can say show all items without folders. Then even if your document is buried 10 folders deep, it is going to appear at the higher level. The item limit is used to specify the items that you see on your page. So your page will start having pagination after that item limit is met. So if you have 120 items, you'll have actually 4 pages, and you have to go through the page one by one. With Office 365, what they have done is, so pagination was a thing back in SharePoint 2010, SharePoint 2013. But with nowadays, how pagination works is it's going to render only first 30 rows, and then as you slide, as you scroll down, then it will bring the other records in the next run. That's how it works. Any questions on list views, or I'll move to the next section? Okay. So now we'll talk about SharePoint permissions. SharePoint permissions is quite a complex topic, and it requires an entire session of its own. And the SharePoint permissions matrix gets quite tricky if you don't understand the basics, and it's very easy to get it wrong, and that's when people will start having all sorts of issues. So what I'll talk about today is the best practices, and these are some simple tips you could use to manage SharePoint permissions on your site. So the first thing to remember is a SharePoint site is always by default locked down. So if you create a new site, it is only going to be available to you and not to anyone else, unless you go and share that site with anyone, with someone. That's point number one. The point number two is that the SharePoint permissions flow in that direction. So any permissions you set on a site level gets inherited by the library or the list, and by the list items or the library items. It goes that way. So if you have given someone read or write access on the site, they will get the write access on the library and on the library items by default, right? So that is called inheritance. The other way of doing it is breaking inheritance. What that means is, let's say this is an HR site, and I am happy for people to access most of the content, but then there is one specific library which I don't want people to access. Then what I'll do is I'll grant them access at a site level, by which they get access to all those libraries and lists within that site. And then I'll go to that specific library or that specific list and then break inheritance at that level. So I'll show you how that's done. So currently, if I share this site with people, as you can see, I've shared it with a few people there. By default, everyone has the permissions that I have granted them at a site level. So you grant site level permissions from here. You just click on that and you assign a person. If you, let's say I assign pick up a person and I'll say save. And after I do that, I can specify that, do I want this person to be a member or owner of the site? So I say that, well, I'm happy for him to be a member. So by by default, he is going to see everything that I have in this site. But now let's, if I want that this cars list is kind of very, I need to hide this list from Neil. So the way to do that would be, I would go to list settings and permissions for the list, for this list. And then I'll say, okay, I have set the unique permissions here. Maybe in my last demo, I demoed it to them. So in here, what you have to do is, this is the view that you're going to see when you get to that list. And first thing you'll say is stop inheriting permissions. So the moment you do that, what now it has done is it is now an entity of its own. It's not a part of that site that you had, that it resides under. And then you select everything, and then you say either say remove these users, and then I'll say grant permissions only to the owners of this site. So what's the name of the site? super unicorn. So I'll say I want permissions, only owners of the site should be able to have this level of permission. So I'll say the owners of the site can have a full control, and I'll just uncheck that so that it doesn't spam people. Okay, so these people have full rights, and then maybe I'll say as far as Neil goes, I want him to have read access, or maybe I don't want him, don't want to grant him any access. So now if Neil goes to that site, he won't be able to see anything. Yeah, so does that make things clear? Yeah. So like I mentioned, that SharePoint permissions is quite involved. So these permission levels that you see here, these are some of the permission level that SharePoint provides you by default, but you can go and create permission level of your own. So you can do things like say that Neil can view this list, he can add items in this list, but maybe he cannot delete anything from the list. So you can create a custom permission level, and you call that add but don't delete. And then it is going to appear in this drop down, and you select it, and then anyone whom you give that permission will be able to contribute, but would not be able to delete anything from the list. But in order to do that level of the effort required to do that level of complexity is not. I would suggest that you create an EBS ticket and have someone help you with that, because it requires some experience and knowledge about SharePoint in order to do that. Any questions on permissions? So like you can set permissions at a list level, you can also go and set permissions at item level. So if there are some items, I gave that example earlier, that if you want to hide some items, and it is not quite relevant, not very relevant when I talk about items, but it is quite relevant when I talk about documents. So the documents are also, it's also the same concept, as the difference being that a list stores just information, whereas a document library stores the document along with the metadata. So in a document library, the same concept goes. So any site permissions at a site level get moved at a document level, but then you can go and share this document with another person. So that person would only be able to see this document, but they won't be able to see anything else in this library. Any questions on permissions? Okay. The next thing I wanted to show you is, so we have seen list, we have seen libraries, and we'll have a quick look at what pages are. So in SharePoint, you can add a page just by clicking on the cog and say add a page. And when you click on add a page, you can specify a name of a page. You can, the top banner, you can add an image on that banner if you like, or there are some default options you can use. For instance, you can save this as a plain text, or like a color block, or like an overlapping block within the banner. And there are several widgets you can use on the page. I'll just cover a few of them. For example, text widget lets you just enter text. It will come up with a similar editor like you have in MS Word, and you can add rich text and all that. You can insert an image if you want, you could some other ones. So you can insert a map. If you insert a map, it just uh, asks you to specify a location, and then it embeds that map within the page. You can go and even I don't know if you know that you can even do some level of charts here. So for example, I click on quick chart. What quick chart lets you do is to create some visuals within SharePoint. So let's say I want to create a pie chart, and I want to create this pie chart based on the data in that list, in the cars list. So I can say get data from the SharePoint list, and I select the list from here, say cars list, and I want that the column that has data will be sales, and the column that shows up in the manufacturer is what I want to show in the labels. So as you can see, now it has created this nice little graph within the page based on the data within the list. Then there you can, if you have Power BI dashboards, you can insert your dashboards directly into the page. So there's a Power BI plugin available. And as you can see, there are lots of widgets available there, and it doesn't make sense for me to cover each one of these, but essentially you can create very rich SharePoint pages just by using combination of these widgets on the page. Once your page is ready, what you could do is you can click to save the page as a draft. What draft does is this page is still available to you, so no one else can see this page. They can only see this page when you click on publish. And if you publish it once and then you make changes to it later, and you save those changes as draft, so people can still look at that page, but they'll see the previous published version of the page. Yeah, and when I say people, it's the people who have read access to the site or member access to the site. If they are owners of the site, they can always see everything that's been going around. So that's about the list, the site pages within SharePoint. Are there any questions so far?
I know we don't want to dig too far into the widgets, but kind of like this bin maps one. Can we do coordinates as well as so GPS coordinates as well as street address?
So there used to be a geospatial column type in SharePoint earlier, where you can specify the longitude and latitude information, but I think they have deprecated that bit. In here, I think it just supports the actual address. I never tried using any coordinates, but that would be a good test. You could go and try that out and let me know if it works. There were
asset locations.
asset locations, yeah.
Did you mention dashboards before?
Power BI dashboards, yes.
So what can you hook into it in terms of data sources for? Is it just data sources that are within SharePoint, or can you hook in external?
You can, so within Power BI can connect to several data sources. There are over hundreds of data sources you can connect it to. Excel, CSV, Oracle, SQL.
Like say REST API somewhere?
Yes, it supports web APIs as well. So you can create a Power BI dashboard by hooking to all those data sources. You publish that dashboard in Office 365, and then you can embed it within the SharePoint page. I know there are 10 minutes remaining. There were two other topics that I couldn't cover in my last session. And those, even if I start discussing them, I don't think I would have enough time to sort of have a discussion around them. So I'll leave these 10 minutes for any questions that you might have. And in the next session, what we are going to see uh, is how the share functionality within SharePoint. So how you share it with external people, what precautions you need to take, how you would be syncing data that's in SharePoint with your local system, how going about, or resolving some of the sync issues that you might see because OneDrive might complain that it's not able to sync. So how do you resolve some of those issues? So I'll talk in details about that. But for what I have covered so far, any questions on that?
When it comes to lists and things like, so we've got lists and then we've got Office 365. So normally would you, if you want to put something on SharePoint that was an Office 365, say, in the case of an Excel spreadsheet, is it best just to link to it and give it a view? Or do you actually import it?
What do you mean by Office 365? As in SharePoint is just part of Office 365.
Okay, so if you have something in an Excel spreadsheet
Yeah.
and you want to put it into a list.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So there's a good way of doing that. So if I click on that and I'll say add an app, and from here import spreadsheet. So if you click on import spreadsheet, what it does, it looks at your Excel columns and it figures out that this is a date column, that's a choice column, and it then creates those columns in SharePoint for you. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that the way we're sort of heading as an organisation? Like I'm just trying to work out how Excel fits with what we're doing here. We're not saying spreadsheets so much. Like, are we moving away from saving a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, to saving a spreadsheet in a list?
Yeah. No, so
I was thinking as well. I'm trying to figure out where this all fits in.
right. That's a very good question. And let me clarify that Excel is not going away. Excel is a very good tool, but it's actually the use case of Excel is quite different. For example, if you're using Excel for your own purpose, for storing something, and then go about using Excel. No one is stopping you from doing that. You want to share it with Neil, then yes, go ahead, share it with Neil using, save it in OneDrive, share it with Neil, that's all good. But let's say all 10 of us are working on that Excel spreadsheet, and soon the Excel spreadsheet is going to grow huge in size, and we have to add some smarts to say these people can't see these columns, and I want them to be not able to enter text fields in number columns, and all those. When it becomes that complex, then it's time to think that is Excel the right tool for a use case like this? Should we use a SharePoint list instead? Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of that functionality you showed us, we can have columns with formulas.
Yeah.
Is that as comprehensive as what you can do in Excel? In terms of referencing A1, with the dollar signs way down and somewhere, reference back up.
Yes, there are, the ways are different. For instance, I showed you the lookup fields.
Yep.
The lookup fields is the same that in Excel, the way you reference another worksheet within that same worksheet, another cell. So lookup field is one of those fields which does the same thing. So
Would it be fair to say that you'd use Excel for more like short-term project type work, and you'd use that for more static, long-term business processes?
correct. Yeah, that's a good way of saying that. Yes.
Right.
For those on Skype, the question was when to use Excel against a SharePoint list or otherwise.
Don't they actually talk to us? They just listen to it. I think they're muted.
Yeah, I've said that they can chat us if they have any questions, or you can take yourselves off mute. Well, no one has yet, but I'm monitoring it just in case they do.
Right. How many of you have been using SharePoint? You haven't used it. It's okay.
Not to that extent like this,
Yeah.
A
no.
little bit, but not
Yeah.
major at all.
It doesn't even that continuous.
Yes, so
Stored documents.
Okay, I've got a question.
yes,
When do we do a site versus doing a library versus, how do you stop the proliferation of, there's X number of people in this room and we each go and have we play to create 5 or 10 little test things ourselves? How do we control and manage that so that there isn't some random explosion of data everywhere that it's not really?
correct. Yeah. So we have put some sort of governance around it. So not everyone can go and create a site of their own. So they'll have to request, they have to create an EBS ticket. And the EBS ticket is just in order to ensure that, because any data that is being created in Office 365 within Airways, there is audit compliance, that record management compliance that requires. You can't just go and delete stuff. You have to have a justification why you deleted something. So just for that purpose, we add some additional metadata in that who was the person who requested the site and what is this site, whose department this site belongs to. We have to tag all that information against the site. That's why you just can't go and create a site of your own. When it comes to creating libraries and lists, there is no limit. You can go and create as many as you like, and it's your site, so it's up to you how you want to manage it. So we have
Any questions?
okay. So if that's the case, then I think I'll thank you for coming here and listening to this, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions if you have. So mine, that's my email address up there. So feel free to send me email or Skype me if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone on Skype.
Thank you.
Bye.